Last night, in a public address, the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, placed England into a third national lockdown, similar to the restrictions we faced in March. All schools are now closed, and you must now only leave your home for essential purposes.
This comes as coronavirus cases continue to rise, with England's medical chief officers warning the NHS was at risk of being overwhelmed within the next 21 days.
Well, the restrictions are expected to last until at least the middle of February, when it's hoped the most vulnerable groups will have received their first dose of the vaccine. So to help us make sense of it all, we're joined by Nick Ferrari and Andrew Neil. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Thank you both for joining us. Nick, no great surprise here. At 8:05 last night, we all knew that it was going to happen.
No great surprise, although the timing one could question, because if you allow that at lunchtime yesterday, the Prime Minister and senior members of his cabinet were saying it was safe for children to go to school, and then, of course, as you rightly say, Philip, 5 minutes after 8, found all schools were closed, you can question the timing of this. Apparently, there was a bit of a row going on within the cabinet. Both Michael Gove and Matt Hancock, the Health Secretary, were saying we cannot let the schools open on Monday. Meanwhile, Gavin Williamson, the Education Secretary, who as recently as last month was taking one local authority, Greenwich Council in London, taking them to court because they wanted to close schools. He was saying all the schools must open. It would appear Boris Johnson wrongly sided with his Education Secretary, then was presented with truly hideous figures. I won't blitz your viewers with too many figures, but just take this. He was told yesterday that the cases have gone from 45,000 on December the 28th to 81,000 on December the 29th. Positive cases. Faced with those numbers, he decided to volte fast, to turn back, but it was a very, very false move. He should never have opened the schools on Monday.
Andrew, bearing in mind the difference between where we are now and where we were in March, the one thing that is surely altering these figures is the sheer amount of testing that we're doing.
Yes, look, it's a lockdown. It's a lockdown in the darkest days of winter, unlike the first lockdown, which came in just as spring was beginning to arrive. It's a pretty miserable time for everybody. But there are two main differences. One is the amount of testing that we do. We now have the capacity to do 700,000 tests a day. I'll say that again, 700,000 tests a day. And we are now moving towards a vaccine to inoculating, giving jabs to the 13 million most vulnerable. And that is a game changer. And we hope that will be done before February is out. And in the darkest days, we know it's always darkest before the dawn. But the vaccines are game changers. And there is hope, but no higher than that come early spring, things will be dramatically changed. It's the one really big hope we have now that we didn't have in the spring.
What about the clarity of schools? It's always called a U-turn. In life, we're, as human beings, are allowed to change our minds. We're allowed to take advice. We listen to someone else. But what this seems to do is it just once again muddies the water. There isn't any direct clarity for people, especially if you've got kids. And last night, people on social media saying, before this happened, I don't even know whether to iron the kids' school uniform. You know, the simple things in life, Andrew.
If you have a real criticism of the government at this particular point, it always seems to be behind the curve. It always seems to be catching up, even with its official advice. It was given scientific advice, I think, on December the 22nd. I think Nick mentioned that the school should close. But it held out and held out, even on the BBC on Sunday. Civil servants even briefing on Monday morning that the schools wouldn't close. Parents have to make plans, schools open or not. What do we do with the kids if they're not? Can we get to work? Big decisions for individuals. And the government always seems to be that bit behind. And I think it's been a shambles, and the government deserves all the criticism it can get. I would just say this, that we have a habit in Britain, and I'm as guilty of this as anybody, particularly in the media, that we always concentrate on the bad side, that the government deserves all the criticism it's getting on schools. But the vaccines are game changers. We've already done 1 million people. That compares to more than all of Europe put together. Here in France, where I am at the moment, how many people have been vaccinated? 351 people. That's it. Even though President Macron said that France was a vaccine global champion. So we have a chance here to get it right. we should now hold the government's feet to the fire on the vaccine issue. The Prime Minister has said 13 million of the most vulnerable vaccinated by around mid-February. Every day we should be checking these figures to make sure that promise is kept. Because if it is, spring starts to look a lot brighter.
Well, let's hope so. Nick, what do you think the schools closing means for the future of our children's education at this point?
I'm afraid it's very dire, and that's what education experts are warning, because allow for the fact that in many instances there are children who've not been provided with laptops or any other way. It's very easy to say, well, the children can be taught from home. Look, I'm lucky. My children are older now, but we had a room. They could have gone into the dining room. They could have sat quietly, and we could have provided them with laptops. There will be thousands, possibly hundreds of thousands of mums and dads watching this now with their heads in their hands. They want to help their children. They haven't got the geographical room. They just don't. They might not have broadband connection. They might not have the kit. They could be working as firefighters, police officers. They are so dog-tired at the end of the day. You get them, and you then expect them to effectively oversee their children's teaching. I fear, much as and I'm really delighted to hear what Andrew said, and he's absolutely right. Let's actually, a day that Boris Johnson probably thought was one to really celebrate yesterday, with that 82-year-old chap being the first one to get the AstraZeneca. That was a real day to be done. But something that I fear we will be reaping for generations is the impact on the education of our children.
So should the schools stay open?
No, they can't. No, they can't. Presented with those numbers, Philip, they absolutely can't. But provision has to be made. And I do think it will be the children who need the education the most will suffer the most. And in some instances, Philip, they might never catch up.
Yeah.
So
Obviously,
sad.
the vaccination is the way forward, as Andrew was saying, and it's remarkable that France have only vaccinated 351 people. I find that number quite astonishing. Why can't we be vaccinating 24 hours a day? I mean, I'd get up at when my turn comes, way down the list, but I'd get up at 3 o'clock in the morning to be vaccinated.
Well, if that's for me, there's a bit of a row going on about the provision, because at the moment there's only 530,000 doses that are available this week. And as Andrew says, we've got to get all those 530,000, and it falls to people like me to make sure that they do. And if you want to get those 13 million in the next 6 weeks, we need to ramp up production. And there's a bit of a row going on over production, supply and permits as well, because each of these batch of drugs has to be given the necessary regulatory approval. So while you're right, yes, let's have clinics going 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Let's face it, we have it with most roadworks in some places. We actually haven't got enough drugs or doses to give. So that's the hold up there.
Andrew? Oh, we lost him. Oh, we've lost him there for a second, I think. Let's.
No, I've got you back. I can hear you. Sorry.
That's all right. Don't worry. Because we're talking to you in France, and we've been very lucky with our connections so far, all the way through lockdown. So I think that's the first time you've broken up.
Maybe the French government heard me saying how few people they'd vaccinated.
I think there's every possibility that you could be being silenced now. So as far as from I don't know whether you heard then, but what we were discussing was the fact that yes, we're at the forefront. Yes, we're rolling this out. Yes, we're being as fast as we possibly can. Is there a possibility we could go 24 hours a day in our vaccination process? But we are limited by the supply of the vaccine.
It is a supply constraint, but that will ramp up as time goes on too. The AstraZeneca Oxford University vaccine is easier to distribute than the Pfizer one. It doesn't have to be stored at minus 70 degrees. You can keep it in a fridge. There will be mistakes. I mean, this is a huge logistical issue. And, people who've never run a railway are very clever at telling people how to run railways. So, of course, there will be setbacks, but we need to stay ahead of the curve. We need to ramp up. We need to hold the government accountable and the NHS and everybody else involved in this. And when you get to the 13 million, the 4 categories most vulnerable, the care workers, those in hospitals, those in care homes, the over 70s or the over 80s, once you get that, you have removed most of the vulnerable people. And you really can, even without more vaccination, you can start to open out a bit. And I would say, coming back to our other discussion, teachers now need to move up the priority level.
Absolutely.
Teachers now need to move up and get vaccinated as well, because what Nick said is absolutely right. We already had, for many, many years, a pretty unequal school system. if you're poor in this country, your chances of getting on are not nearly as good as if you're middle class or above that. The COVID has exacerbated that. It has made the inequalities even greater. And so we have an obligation to get teachers, particularly teachers, I would say, in the state schools and those state schools in some of our poorest areas. Get them first and then get these kids back to school. That would do more than anything else for inequality in this country.
Let's finish, gentlemen, on the memes that are keeping the nation's spirits up. Obviously, people are so bright. It's what I love, the fact is it happens so fast, doesn't it?
So quick.
And these were some of the first ones that arrived on my phone last night. And this is one that says, if you haven't seen it, from midnight on June the 11th, 2037, we will move into Tier 74. You can no longer text people. You must communicate by Morse code only. We strongly recommend holding your breath for as much of the day as possible. We will beat this.
Oh, no.
Next one. What else have we got? There you go. UK 2035. Few more months and we've got this beat.
Please don't.
And this is first day back at school after lockdown.
This got sent round my mum's WhatsApp group chat at school yesterday. And that and lots of wine emojis.
There you go. When you hear we're going into hashtag lockdown again.
Mine would be bigger than that, I have to say. It's far too small to cut it.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
See you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Oh, goodness me.